And so I would love to turn the mic over to Uri. And as I said, he'll be introducing you to some of our alumni and leading a conversation with them. I'm very excited to hear what they have to say. Thanks, Uri.
Hey, Kat, thank you very much. Do we have Ivana and Joey? If you guys want to join on stage, as it were.
Hey, Uri, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, great. And Ivana.
Uri.
Hi, everybody. So, hi all, thanks again for inviting us to discuss some advice for hard tech and biotech founders. We're really lucky today to be joined by two fantastic founders that recently took their companies through YC. I would start with just maybe bringing up a couple of points that we went through yesterday, and hopefully you'll see some of these reflected in their stories as well. So we talked a little bit yesterday about, in terms of advice, about how it's important to do the killer experiment early, how it's important to think big and to think about the milestones that you can get to efficiently with an 80-20 rule. I think that you'll hear how that's played out in actual real life for both Ivana and Joey, and how hopefully it helped them along the way. So with that, best advice is from your peers, and maybe Joey and Ivana, you can tell us a little bit about yourselves. Maybe starting with Joey, can you tell us about Arpeggio?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Uri, and just really excited to be here today and excited to answer questions and give my perspective. But my name is Joey Azofeifa. I'm the CEO and founder of Arpeggio Biosciences. We're a preclinical drug discovery company focusing on drugging transcription factors, which are really important proteins that drive cancer growth. So a lot of our early programs are around trying to cure different types of cancer, and just kind of in a unique way of doing that through machine learning and RNA sequencing that I can definitely answer deeper questions about if you guys have any. But in a nutshell, that's me. My background is actually in computer science. So I have a PhD in computer science from the University of Colorado in the United States. And I worked with, I was co-advised actually between two advisors. One was a mathematician, more of a statistician and focusing on machine learning. And the other was a geneticist. And so when I was getting my PhD and then subsequent postdoc, a lot of my research was focused on bringing computational methodologies to a really fascinating cutting edge technology of sequencing RNA. And, a lot of these really fancy next generational sequencing data types, although they're pushing really, really forward quickly, have lacked for decades on the computational support. And so my research and ultimately some of the patents that were the foundation for our company were really about developing computational methods and machine learning algorithms to process this massive data. In any case, I'll stop there. And Ivana, I'll let you go.
Ivana, tell us about Asher Bio.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ivana. Really happy to be here. Happy to see my former batchmates, partner, and other OIC members. So I'm one of the two founders of Asher Bio, currently CEO. We are developing a platform of antibody-based drugs that work on the immune system. And so our drugs, the drugs that we're making, target the immune cells to fight cancers and other diseases where immune system plays a role. So there, other companies who are in this field, immunotherapies have become very hot recently. My co-founder and I thought we had a unique perspective and an approach and how to make immunotherapies more selective and really get them to act on the quote unquote desired cell types and those immune cells that really matter for the context of that disease, and avoid, cells that, are not relevant and are just kind of either causing toxicity or not really helping the immune system. And so we had a unique perspective, and that's what drove us to start Asher Bio. I'm an immunologist by training. I got my PhD back in 2010, so a long time ago. And I always wanted to really apply scientific knowledge to make an immediate and clear impact in the lives of patients. And that's what kept driving me out of academia into industry. But, being in industry for some time, I was able to see firsthand, the challenges of developing drugs in a large company and how slow things can move, and how often priorities shift and programs get discontinued for reasons that are not always scientific. And so I thought about starting a company several times before, in my career, and thinking that, you could be much more efficient in a smaller team. And so that's how I ended up with starting Asher Bio.
Awesome. So the two of you started from really different places. Joey, you said you'd done your PhD and you were doing your postdoc. Can you tell us a little bit that quitting a postdoc and starting a biotech company, that's a kind of an abrupt career change, and what made you decide that was the right time to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the most abrupt. Transitioning from academia into industry is hard on its own. Obviously, industry and biotech have very different priorities than academic research. But then coupled to that, the trying to start a company from scratch. So, during my postdoc and after, we were collaborating with a therapeutics company called Forma Therapeutics. They have a set of really impressive compounds that inhibit epigenetic modulators like CBP or BET, and play really critical roles in transcription factors, obviously the core research that I was performing during my academic work. And I kind of pitched them on our technology of sequencing RNA and applying the machine learning algorithms that we were developing. And they were very excited, but also very worried that they couldn't do it themselves. So there was this kind of comment of, Joey, this sounds amazing. It would have a big impact in our programs, but we don't have the time, bandwidth, experience, or just knowledge really to be able to achieve RNA sequencing with these machine learning techniques in our lab. But if you ever start a company, definitely let us know, and we'll be your first customer. And I think that was a signal to us, the researchers at CU and myself, that number one, there was a market for RNA sequencing and computational modeling. And two, that we kind of already had an in on our first customer. And so with that kind of general foundation, we did stand up a company. We repitched Forma. They actually became our first customer. And crazily enough, we bootstrapped ourselves as a biotech company for about a year and a half, running purely on revenue from our RNA sequencing and machine learning based business. And I think that's a rare story for biotechnology companies, but it absolutely was critical, I think, to our later success that I can talk about. But that's kind of more in depth about the origin of Arpeggio.
Cool. So that's one extreme, starting while still a student, actually quitting your career, your student career. And Ivana, you did it differently. You became a industry expert and had a wealth of domain-specific experience. What made you decide that you had this fantastic position? You were a senior director at Pfizer?
Director.
How did you come to decide that now is the time to leave?
Yeah, it's not an easy decision. I mean, but like as I mentioned, I thought about starting a company several times. Sometimes it just this is what what you want to do, and it's just how So it's been that idea's been with me for a while. And so, what drove me to leave my nice and comfortable, Pfizer job was I kind of really believed that it would be possible for me to do it. This time what was different is I found I had a right co-founder. So I had found someone who had like very complementary expertise And I can talk about that, talk about my co-founder later. But really finding the right co-founder was key, and also the right early team. So a few of our teammates who wanted to join us early on, and I have to say, really getting access to YC backing very early on. Knowing that we could get this funding, even though it was a small grant, but it's just something that we could get early on, and the support of YC. That really helped us, sort of take off. So I should also mention that in addition to the co-founder and the early team, what was also critical was that there was a clear set of experiments that we thought we could do to de-risk the idea. And so, we knew that there was something immediately achievable that could really raise our profile and value. And so there were these tools, antibody tools and protein tools that we could make in a few weeks' time, as opposed to a few months or a year that could take sometimes when you're starting new things in the lab, right? So, I wouldn't say you need all of these, the right co-founder, the right team, and like some clear yes or no experiments, but, the more of these you have, the more likely, it could be to get you over that initial threshold. But yeah, it was not easy. It was just initially, back in the summer of 19, it was just the two of us, that left our big industry jobs with an idea for a new type of a drug. And we had no connections with VCs. We were in Silicon Valley. We knew no one that was a VC, tech or biotech, even angel investors. You hear about all these, founders and their success stories. And so, you want to be part of that story, but we just didn't know anyone that we could go to directly. We just had our technical knowledge and our industry background. And so that's how we started.
So you actually touched on something really important there, because I think it's probably fair to say that when you leave a job at a major pharmaceutical company, they don't let you take many things with you. So you didn't have your equipment, you didn't have your lab, you didn't have your notebooks. You started with only what's in your head and each other. Can you tell people how much time and how much money it took you to go from an experiment on a piece of paper that you applied to YC with, mm-hmm. to a final proof of concept?
Yeah. So, it took us 10 weeks, exactly the amount of time that the YC batch took. And, I think.
And what was your proof of concept? What did you actually do?
Yeah, so we actually, we started with an idea. We didn't have a lab or a place to work. But, I have to say the landscape has changed, and, a lot of our, ability for us to get to that 10 weeks, data in 10 weeks was, just the infrastructure here has changed. There's a lot of shared lab spaces. There's, obviously the YC backing and other places are doing it as well now. And there are, places where you can rent, and keep your mice, so you can do mouse studies yourself instead of paying a CRO. And so the infrastructure has really, changed since 10 years ago. And it is possible to just start with $150,000 and one lab bench and, one row worth of cages, mouse cages, and do that. And so I think.
And that is, you went from, you cured cancer in mice in 10 weeks?
Yeah, so again, it was back to the tools that we thought, we could make these novel proteins and starting from sort of things that existed in the literature, just putting the pieces together. And so, and that was the key. If we had to generate some, novel antibodies that would have taken us, we had to immunize mice and, it would have taken us months. So that, we'd have to take a different path. But we found, sort of a way to do it by just, taking some things that were already existing in the literature, putting them in a novel way. And so we weren't focused on getting that perfect proprietary molecule. We were focused on just getting a prototype that we cloned, expressed, purified the protein, then we put it into in vitro assays, and we put it into our rented vivarium where we housed our own mice, and we were able to inject the tumors and this prototype drug and show that it worked better than what was currently out there. And so we were, focused on getting that done, and, it was crazy time, but, I guess it was just the pressure of the demo day, and that was our deadline. We had to get something done by that time, and so we just had to come up. There was no other option. We just had to find ways to get it done. Yeah.
It's amazing what you can do on a limited budget with a clear milestone. Joey, you also have a pretty amazing story about a transformative experiment during YC, I think. Wait, what happened with Arpeggio?
Yeah. So I think Ivana hit on something really good too, which is, or circled around it, which is defining milestones and demo day goals, right? And I think that really defined that key experiment. So for us, because we were more commercial driven at the time, and what we wanted to show to investors was acquisition of big pharma partnerships on our platform. My demo day goals were to get as many customers paying us for our platform as humanly possible, right? And so the key experiments that follow from something as, it's a simple idea, just say, get 10 more customers, but it's actually quite challenging in 2.5 months to get, especially pharma customers that take a long time to sign MSAs and SOWs and term sheets. But in any case, our key experiment was just comparing our platform to what's already out there, right? So that we could very easily show and demonstrate to pharmaceutical groups that our way of sequencing RNA was more sensitive and more accurate than what is currently available. And so yeah, I think very early on in the summer, during my experience with YC, Uri and Jared and myself, we all kind of agreed that, the best story for Arpeggio was to, really show market traction for our platform. And I think it really served Arpeggio well at demo day. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you both hit on some of the key stories that you wanted to tell. And Ivana, you were an incredibly efficient path. I think that's kind of, most people don't expect that you can get to, from zero to animal data in that little money and that little time. You had to be really, really efficient in everything you did. Other than doing things yourselves, like what were some of your key metrics that you'd give as advice to founders that are scrappy and want to stay alive? How did you figure out what to shave and what to keep in order to end up with a better story at the end?
Yeah, so I think the $150,000 really forces you to think outside the box. I think when we first heard we were confused initially what the size of the YC grant was, and when we heard, it's like, wait, what are we going to do with this much money? But in the end, like, this is what you have, and you have to make the best out of it. And so we had a couple of different ideas. Actually, it wasn't just one idea, and we initially started testing both, or making two different types of molecules, and very quickly we saw that there was a lot of challenges with one of these ideas, even though that was our favorite one, and we thought it would be, something that's very differentiated in the field. But it was technically challenging when we didn't have time to figure it out, and we said, well, hey, let's try to do this easier piece, and hopefully we'll get the next round, and we'll be able to go back to this, this other idea that was our favorite. And so we went with something that was, technically less challenging, yet still we're able to find a way to differentiate, to show that in one experiment, you could get, better killing of tumors while, animals, not losing weight. So you're showing both sides of the immunotherapies, less toxicity, and then more cancer killing. But yeah, so we decided very early on we had to drop one thing and just focus on getting one idea through, and so that was part of it. And the other is just continuing to find ways to do things cheaply and fast. Like I mentioned, this one mouse study, if outsourced, costs $50,000, but you can sign a lease and rent. You can sign a lease for a vivarium. It is a yearly lease, but you're hoping that you'll eventually get that next round, that you'll be continue to pay your monthly vivarium bills. And in the end, for 1 year worth of mouse space, you end up doing like 20 different mouse studies, right? So I think that sort of thinking really helped us navigate the early stages well.
Ivana, your company started with YC. Joey, you started before YC. So what's one of the things that changed? What's like the pre-YC version of how you were doing things and the during YC or post-YC version?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think one of the things that YC does a really great job with is communication, right? And training you how to, I mean, I don't even know if I'm good at it yet, right? I think it's a lifelong thing, but certainly before YC, I was not. Clearly and simply stating what your company does and what, you know, and what you do, right? For Arpeggio, we're drugging transcription factors, but I couldn't say that somehow before YC. So I think communication is one of those.
This was your slide, right?
Exactly. Yes. Thanks for bringing this up. So as you can see here, folks, you know, my company, we apply machine learning and we collect data on massive scales, terabytes of data. And I would often go to pharma companies and I would say, look at all this complexity. Isn't it amazing? And they would say, this is confusing. We're not going to give you any money because we don't understand what you're doing, because you can't tell us simply what your company does, right? And so, you know, post YC, what the story came to was a bar chart where it was just current method, RNA sequencing, our method, Arpeggio, and we were much better at resolving estrogen receptor transition factor targets than the current technique, RNA-seq. And that was a story that really worked. And in fact, I use this piece of data that we're looking at right here in pretty much every single pitch I give to current pharma partners, as well as investors. It's simple, it's easy. You can see that we're 10x better than what's currently available. But again, getting to that point and letting go of complexity is just as much an intellectual problem as it is an emotional one. When you're in academia, in some ways you're trained to think in complexity. You're trained to think about signaling pathways and circuitries and complex mathematics, and you almost live for the complexity. But when you transition, certainly when you transition to the role of a CEO or a founder where your goal is now to sell, whether it's selling pharma, selling investors, you're selling your story, selling future employees that you want to come join your company, you have to get your message across quickly, and it needs to like implant in their brain. And so I think YC did a phenomenal job at training us, especially the deep tech founders, to speak more clearly and concisely about what we do.
And do you have any examples of what's your equivalent of the mouse experiments, where instead of paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for things, do you have a?
Yeah. So what are my hacks? Yeah. So one hack was during YC and shortly after, during our seed fundraise, I had a prospective investor who was harping on us getting this to work in whole blood, and with the ultimate goal being that could our platform become a diagnostic for which you'd be drawing blood and isolating, in some cases, PBMCs. And so we could have paid a CRO and we could have done a large study to gather that blood, and we could have gone through lots of red tape and a lot of legal. But I was just kind of fed up at that point in time, and I wanted to close our round. And so I went to a phlebotomist in Mountain View, California, right down the road from where I was living at the time. She drew my blood. I sent it to the lab in Boulder, Colorado, where my company is formed. And we did, ProSeq, which is our assay, in my blood. So now I have my own transcriptome on my computer, actually. And that cost, $10 or, whatever the phlebotomist cost was. And there was no legal. We got it through quickly. And I could show the investor that indeed our technology works in blood samples. So, I think, again, cost is just as much as important as getting that key experiment quickly, right? Because your burn is always choking you. There's always competition who's trying to beat you at a better RNA sequencing company or a better TF drug company. So getting that data fast is also really high priority. And those hacks in that case was really beneficial for us to get it quickly.
So both of you also have had to speak to very different types of customers, as it were. So Joe, you started out as a service company where you literally had customers, and Ivana, you started out as an R&D company where your customers are your investors to some extent. And it's been very different paths of what you've had to do, both in the context of Demo Day and subsequent to Demo Day. Ivana, as the pure R&D company, can you tell us a little bit about what that path is like, trying to start a antibody drug company from scratch and pitching to investors? How's that road gone?
Yeah, well, initially it didn't go so well. We were, post Demo Day, we started, fundraising. We were really excited about our initial promising data. We just, everyone at YC was excited, our partners or, friends and our batchmates, wow, we got this amazing mouse data. And so we put that data into a deck and we started showing it to a lot of investors. After Demo Day, you get a lot of likes and a lot of emails, a lot of people contact you. And these initial, investors are, a lot of them are angel investors or tech investors, people that were successful in many different areas, really almost no science background. And they were all very smart, but, just they were not scientists. And so our deck was like a detailed science presentation to Pfizer's research committee. Basically, we had a ton of background information, explaining the entire field. And, I think I have, a couple of example slides, we're showing protein structures and FACS plots. And, we're showing this to like, investors that have done real estate and, movie business. And, and one of them actually invested in us. And, he just kept looking at our slides. It's like, I like these two guys, but like, what the hell are they talking about? And he invested some money, but, I'm sure he would invest a lot more had he understood what we were actually working on. And so, we had to, sit down with the YC partners after, a month or, sort of not getting a lot of traction after Demo Day and just having a few smaller checks. And, we realized that, yes, our story was, very complicated and, we shouldn't be showing the same deck to tech and some of the biotech investors. And, initially we didn't talk to that many biotech investors. It was actually mostly tech. And those are the investors that are willing to invest in, very early stage companies and founders with no prior, sort of experience building companies. And so we had to, we ended up creating two decks, and, you can see that the slides on the right, are very polished, very simple. There's still some science there, but, it does, it's very, it's easy to understand. And, you want to provide some background, but, don't overwhelm don't try to impress your tech investors with the background. And so after that, things, we did pick up traction, and we started getting investors to write the checks, but it did take a lot of polishing and working with the YC partners and other companies in the batch to figure out what went wrong.
And how are things going now?
Mm-hmm.
How are things going now?
Yeah, so so things are going really well now. I think it still was not an easy road, even after we polished our deck. We continued to fundraise. And our drugs are not simple to explain. They are composed of multiple different parts, and so it's still even though we tried to really simplify our message, it still wasn't easy, But in the end, we didn't raise as much as we wanted to after Demo Day. We thought we would get to like the 3 million, which would have been great to get us to the next set of milestones, and we ended up raising $1 million, which is still great. And so we had to sort of reprioritize and say, all right, well, what can we do with this 1 million now to get us to the next step? And so we refocused. We said, well, we have to kind of adjust our milestones and then make sure that with this $1 million we could get to some more de-risking. But we continued to fundraise, right? So that's one thing we never gave up. It was we knew months after month, going into another meeting, it's going to probably be a no. We're probably not going to get that second meeting, but we had to keep fundraising. And in the end, we finally got our second meeting with a really great biotech investor that wasn't really on our list, but just serendipity or just being persistent and just talking to everyone that happened to cross our paths. We ended up talking to them and getting that second meeting. At that point, we made a risky decision, which was just our gut feeling that this was the right investor, even though they didn't invest. They had a different type, sort of investing philosophy. They founded companies within. They didn't fund outside founders. But we really hit it off with them, and we sort of decided to really focus on them. We dropped our other leads and just really spent all of our time and energy in working with them and trying to convince them that we could work together. And so they ended up investing in our SAFE and then promising to be our lead investor in Series A round, which we're hoping to close in the next few weeks. So yeah, so now it's knock on wood, it's never over until it's signed, but it still wasn't an easy path, but I think it was just being persistent and making some decisions that might be risky or different to what people would say, but just kind of following your gut, listening to others, but following in the end your gut feeling. And so.
How many investors do you think you spoke to overall?
Oh, it was over 50 at least. Yeah.
And so, Joey, you had a different path. When you were going through YC, you're focused on services, and you've transitioned into developing drugs. So how did that go in the context of raising money and telling a story and then having to change your story?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think so. The goal for Arpeggio at its root was always to be a therapeutics company. I think it's just that because we were unlike Ivana, we didn't have 15 years of Pfizer experience and quote unquote veterans of pharma. I think that Arpeggio needed validation from other big pharma companies, right, to kind of show that these guys that just came out of their PhD weren't just selling snake oil, that they were legitimate. And so especially in the early days, the services and the platform deals with pharma were absolutely critical to show that validation of our technology. Now that we've accomplished that in many contexts, ultimately Arpeggio is founded by scientists and creative thinkers, and I don't think what gets us up at night is working on large high revenue deals, but ultimately we want to cure cancer and affect change in a patient. And so now we're making this really wonderful transition away from just doing raw fee-for-service deals and moving into our own asset generation. And I should also say, for the folks that are interested in creating biotech companies around a platform, I think it's generally, and you've probably heard to some extent on Endpoint News or Fierce Biotech, these large biobucks deals with $1 billion and lots of huge upfront milestone payments. And I think that it's very challenging to command partnership deals like that when all you have is a platform. And I shouldn't say all, right? I spent 10 years of my life in academia developing this platform. But I think at the end of the day, what gets business development folks at Pfizer and Novartis and Genentech really excited is an asset, is a drug. And so ultimately our plan now is to develop compounds right to the point where we can start partnering with them, with some of our current partners. We've been fortunate to work with 5 of the top 10 pharma companies in the world and co-develop our early stage assets. And so I think at that point, we'll be able to command much larger platform deals and be that $1 billion company that YC wants us to be. But that's kind of I think that's that transition and why that transition occurred. And I also think it's why it's a very necessary transition, especially because if you don't make that transition into therapeutics, it's just going to be tough, I think, to make make a very valuable, high impact company with just a platform. Yeah.
So both of you, talked about your some of the folks that helped you start the company, and Joey in the context of academics, and Ivana in the context of your co-founder. Joey, you came through YC as a solo founder, and Ivana, you came through with a co-founder. They're very different paths. What are your thoughts on co-founders and startup life? Ivana, go back to you for this first.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's every story is different, right? So in my case, and there's no, sort of right path, in my case, finding the right co-founder was really critical. So, to make immunotherapy drugs, you need an immunologist and a protein engineer, and they need to talk to each other and kind of understand each other's language. And so between the two of us, we had the right experience, the expertise, and the mindset, to really get on this journey. So, we do have we do still have our differences, so Andy is more practical and less of a risk taker, and I'm more willing to take the risk, but, in the end, we managed to balance each other out and really stay committed to our vision and our long-term goals. And I have to say that being part of that YC community, where many of the companies have similar stories, multiple co-founders who go through similar, ups and downs and issues and, managing these relationships, it was very helpful, and it really gave us the right perspective from very early on. Just, this is how it is. You start companies with a co-founder, and things can be great, and sometimes there's things you need to work on in those relationships. Yeah.
Great. And Joey, your path was a little bit different.
Yeah, no, so I did. I went through YC as a solo founder. The early days of Arpeggio, my company, were formed by people, mostly academic advisors of mine, right, back in the day. And I think, again, this is a story for a lot of folks here that, if you're thinking about a company that's coming out of academic research from your university, it's often common, I think, to bring the scientific advisor you had along for the ride, and scientific advisors in many cases. And so, I think that in general is a good thing. I think it's just more about having the conversations about setting expectations with that advisor about what their role would be in the company, right? So in my case, Robin Dow, who I have nothing but wonderful things to say about, she was a professor of molecular cell and developmental biology at CU. She's tenured, she's very famous. And when we initially started the company, we kind of assumed that she would play as much a role in the company as I would, but that obviously that's not the case. She has a teaching load in her own lab, which basically acts as a startup. And I was really kind of wanting to take the technology that we developed together and commercialize it and develop drugs, right? And I think, again, when you've spent so much time working with somebody, in the case of Robin, almost 5 years, it feels natural to want to do that. But really, that first 5 years of research is maybe 2% of the road of your company, right? The sorts of platform developments we've done at Arpeggio since, the IP we've generated, the patents we filed, they almost don't even resemble what we started with, right, as a company. And I think that's also something to consider too, is that, when you're thinking about co-founders, you're thinking about people bringing them on very early for which you're going to give presumably very large portions of the company to, they need to be in it for the long haul and evolve with you and evolve with changes in technology. It's one of the most beautiful things in my case. Some of the early employees, like Joel Baskin or Maria Lai in our company, they started with me, day one and have transitioned through, so many different variants of sequencing RNA, different drug programs, different partners. We had a very large Novartis deal and the Forma Therapeutics deal. And so I think, again, like when you're looking for a co-founder or looking for early employees, startup life is really, really about being flexible. And I think looking for that flexibility in folks is crucial. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, want to second that. I just don't want to, give credit to the co-founder alone. We did have, 4 other early employees that were, essentially founding employees and were really critical for us to really go through that early difficult stage. And I mean, another, starting a company is hard, but, starting a company and building it during COVID times is even harder, maybe many times harder. And so I don't think we would have made it had it not been for those early, loyal and flexible employees who were willing to just do whatever it took to continue working in the lab. So I think it was like middle of March when the shelter in place in our county started, and so everyone was supposed to just go home and stop all the work. But we managed to just we got a permission to come to continue coming to our shared lab incubator, and all of our employees continued coming to work and essentially putting in almost full time, while other companies have completely shut down and have not still today started working. And so I think just having that early founding team and founding employees who really believe in your mission was critical for us to survive the early unknowns of the COVID era. Yeah.
So you both started kind of an interesting time as well, right, for a global pandemic. And it's been a little while since you had the takeoff from YC. So about a year out, is it getting easier? Is it getting harder? What do you think? Are the lessons that you learned continuing to be important? How is life looking now compared to 6 months ago? Joey.
Yeah. No, this is great. I mean, definitely better. I mean, I think echoing Ivana's point though, COVID is rough. It's rough on employee psyches. It's rough on potential partnership deals. It's rough on those sorts of things. But our company is 10x, more than 10x stronger than it was pre-YC or during YC or the first 4 months after YC, right? And again, I think I attribute that to a few things. One is obviously the communication that I talked about and being really trying to practice being a clear communicator and selling your message. But then another really crucial thing is networking. Again, as a CEO, rather as a scientist turned CEO, I probably am not the best. I did not come into the CEO role being a natural networking person, right? Trying to find relationships, build relationships with other companies or just with potential employees or just with human beings like through YC. And during YC, you meet so many different types of companies. You get so used to talking about yourself and hearing about what other folks are working on. You naturally become a better networker. And I think networking, especially in my job, because I work with so many other companies, is just such an important skill. And so post YC, we've seen, oh my gosh, during YC, I think we were working with 5 pharmaceutical companies, and now we have 40, maybe 39 companies that are actively working with us or have active projects with us, right? So this is a huge increase, and again, completely attributed to the fact that we just got better at networking. We got better at talking to people, and I got better at sending emails and responding to emails. And in the COVID environment, it's really about taking tons of Zoom calls, and trying to build relationships virtually. These are all challenging things, but again, with the right attitude and just kind of the right amount of courage, it's absolutely possible. So yeah, I think we're absolutely, just from our customer acquisition side, a much better company, and then the excitement around some of our internal programs. Yeah, I mean, we're just definitely a better company. Yeah, post YC.
How about you, Ivana? How are things? Better or worse, the same, up, down, sideways?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, better. 100% agree with what Joey said. Just obviously the being at YC was critical for us to build that persistence and enable us, to continue on this path. But going through COVID times with our early team, was very was in the end turned out to be a great experience because everybody got closer and we realized how important is what we are working on to everyone. Important enough to leave your house during COVID times and continue doing experiments. So I mean, I would say can't say that things are getting easier. Year one was hard, and year two is probably not easier. We have new problems. We're expanding our team. We're trying to do more than one program. We're building our pipeline and hiring new scientists and integrating them into the team. Interviewing online and hiring people without seeing them. That's very new. Without seeing them in person or meeting them in person, just doing everything on Zoom. Those are some of the new.
How many people and how many programs do you have right now? Not even 2 years in?
Yeah. So we're at 18 right now. And we have 4 sort of major programs that we're pursuing and some of the side programs that, we're keeping on the side and, trying to find time for some of the side projects. Yeah. But, actively pursuing 4 different, hopefully, future drugs.
Sounds like things are going pretty much up into the right. Not bad for starting with an idea on a piece of paper and under $150,000. So as we're getting closer to the end, do either of you have any final advice before we turn over to some questions that you'd want to share with new founders that are thinking about their startups? Or should they even start a startup?
I have a theory. Yeah, I'll go. I have a theory. I don't know if it's advice, but it's a theory. And I should also say one of the best things YC ever said was never trust a founder solely, founder's advice, because it's very myopic. We have a very unique journey. And so our advice is very tailored to what we experienced. So bearing all of that in mind, what a piece of advice you hear a lot, I think, when starting a company is focus, right? You want to do one thing really, really well and crush that one thing and build that thing and build a market for that thing, build a customer base for that thing, and then expand after that. And your Series A or Series B are expanding into different verticals. For Arpeggio, this was not the story for us in the early days. We were scrappy and we had to be. We were bootstrapping ourselves. We were trying to acquire customers. So we were applying our technology in a bazillion different indications: inflammation biology, liver cancer, tons of prostate cancer, tons of cervical cancer. I mean, there's neuro. It was just everywhere, right? There was absolutely no focus to our platform application. And in some ways, that lack of focus was absolutely critical because we were flexible. We could move between different projects really quickly. We developed processes in the lab that allowed us to go between different types of biology fast. We acquired lots of customers quickly. And that was great, I think, for our seed round. And so maybe my advice, especially in the early days, is don't try and focus so much on just one thing and just see where your platform takes you. Now, our company Arpeggio is in the awful position of saying we've done too much. We've accomplished and we've gone too broad and we've gone into too many areas and we've shown proof of concept in too many drug classes and too many target classes. Now what? So we've had to really shift our mindset into focusing on just one specific protein, transcription factors, and just owning that space. And again, I think this was my journey. This was my experience. That lack of focus ended up being really critical for us. But again, I think it's just, that was my experience given my journey. So that's kind of, I don't know if that's my advice, but it's more of a theory on don't focus early, focus later. Yeah.
Okay. And Ivana, for Asher Bio, any advice that you want to share?
Yeah, maybe one piece of advice, and again, don't listen to our advice, but just this is our story. Just I guess continue even after getting, some negative data. So there was a time when maybe a few months into our experiments, one particular assay or system, gave us some unexpected, results. But in science, it's not just about that one weird data piece. It's about continuing to look at or test your hypothesis in multiple ways and build more and more data to your story, give more and more data to your story. And so, just don't be discouraged when there's just one sort of piece of data that doesn't agree with or doesn't look as expected. Continue doing experiments, while you have the funding, and just until you've really fully de-risked your idea, until you have a story. So that would be one piece of advice. Don't give up too early. Yeah.
Always good advice. Yeah. So with that, I understand there are also some questions that people are asking. So I'd like to call Yusuke to join.
Hello, this is Yusuke from Uri, on C stage. I'm venture capital in Japan, based on Tokyo. I did my grad school at Stanford, and my background as a chemical biologist here. And I went to the BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, for a few years, and I joined this firm like 3 years ago now. So I guess, like, from viewpoint from Japanese founders or many researchers here, I usually ask questions about, like, what happened if, I know you guys will succeed in the future, but what happened, like, the company didn't go well? Do you think that you guys can go back to researchers, or like any other career option you guys have? I think Japanese people are more conservative and need more like sense of like security here. So I don't think if that company crashed, you guys gonna be dead, of course, right? So what do you think about the future, like when it didn't went well?
Yeah. What's my exit strategy for my not exit? I think, for me, it's really about trying to clarify what I enjoy doing. And personally, I enjoy building things at the end of the day. I like creating things, seeing things grow. So I think that if Arpeggio failed, I would just start another company, assuming that my investors didn't kill me or weren't totally disappointed. I don't know. I made the decision very early in my career that academia wasn't right for me personally. I wanted to develop a product that had impact. And I also wanted to scale things. Again, this is just my personality for wanting growth. I think in academia, it's much more challenging to scale an idea. So no, I mean, I have lots of ideas for other companies, but I have to let Arpeggio grow first, and then we'll see it comes. Yeah. I don't know about you, Ivana.
Yeah, I think it's just important not to think about that option.
No, exactly.
Like, there is no other option. So I think we have backup plans if we don't get Series A. Like we'll unfortunately have to let go of some of the employees and keep only the minimum team going. We'll take from our savings and invest into another idea, and so I mean it's just. I guess at this point, like you can't think of a bad exit or else, because every day is so hard. If you even thought about that as an option, I think So I think it's important not to think about that and just focus all your thoughts into how are you going to make this work, and if it failed, what's your how are you going to pivot and pick up and work on something else, right, in that company. Yeah.
I'll actually say one of the hallmarks of a fantastic founder is plowing onwards. Just there's a wall in front of you. You go through the wall, over the wall, around the wall, but you know you have to get on the other side of the wall. And if you stop and say, there's a wall, that looks tough, big wall. I don't know about getting around that wall. It might be hard to get over the wall. It might be hard to go around. Just going through the wall, over the walls, around them, nobody cares how you get to the other side, but you get to the other side. The people that actually make that happen, they're indomitable. That is going to be a great founder. I think both of these guys are pretty great examples of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Uri. I mean, there were so many times where Arpeggio had, especially in the bootstrap days, where we had, 6 weeks left to live, right? And I was like always on the precipice of firing, or firing is wrong word, laying off half the company, right? I mean, half the company was like 4 people, but still, it's still, it's a lot of pressure, but you just keep moving forward, as an aside, I run a lot. I run in the mountains. I've been trail running for a long time, and I really liken starting a company to just running. It's like putting one foot in front of the other and repeating, and not letting your mind worry so much about the exhaustion, and just letting your mind worry about that next step, that next milestone. And in some cases, it's just like sending that email right before you go to bed, like that, even very simple milestones like that. So yeah, I don't know if I've ever actually contemplated in a long time what I would do if Arpeggio failed. I don't know.
But the question of culture is an important one, and that's something which is hard to overcome. I'll say, as a hiring technique, when I hire people, I like to ask them, tell me about where you failed. Because I don't believe people who only succeeded. First of all, everybody has a failure. And we all learn much more from our mistakes than we do from our successes, which sometimes come by accident. So why not? I think for a founder to try something amazingly huge to change the world and fail is still a much more wonderful thing than to try and do something irrelevant and small but succeed.
Yeah, that's so true. Like I feel that was the win during my Bay Area era, but like if I talk with my father or like mother, they still think that changing the job is not the best way. Like stay on the big company for 30 years and you will have a steady family and life, and that should be the good thing. Like that's like traditional Japanese family or still on the father-mother generation. So I guess many like founders or scientists want to start a company here, but they get some like stopper from the family or any other relatives. That's kind of here. So
yeah, I could totally relate that with you. I mean, I'm from Montenegro originally, which is former Yugoslavia, the Balkans, very, very traditional. My parents were not happy when I told them that I'm using my leftover, Pfizer money and to put it into, our startup instead of getting a new job, and so that's, I can totally relate. I think you just have to, they're your family, you have to respect their opinions, but, in the end, they'll support you if you do make that decision for yourself. If that's what you want. In the end, they've been so supportive of this decision. Yeah. So.
Can I ask my job-related questions? Quick one. What do you think about like the difference between the West Coast venture capital and the East Coast like traditional biotech venture capital?
Yeah. I'm afraid to say because I don't want to tick anybody off. Ivana or Uri, do you guys want to talk about that?
Now it's interesting, and when you open it up like that, now we really.
We'll let Uri answer. We'll let Uri answer.
Let Uri.
Yeah. We still have to talk to both East Coast and West Coast investors, right?
Exactly.
So there's no one right way of doing anything. but every region has its own personality. Japan has a personality, London has got a personality, Boston has a personality, and San Francisco has a personality. People will go to places like Boston, to Harvard, or to Oxford because they want to be professors. And in Boston, people care about how many degrees come after your name and how many papers have you published. People go to San Francisco because they want to create things. They want to invent something new. They want to be part of a startup. That's the mentality that tends to attract people there. Which means that if I'm an investor in the West Coast and I'm an investor on the East Coast, I've got to cater to different personalities. If somebody cares a lot about the science that they're producing, it makes a lot of sense for me as an investor to say, Professor, Doctor, this is really fantastic science. I would like to buy your science and I will pay you handsomely to be part of this, but let me put my team of people into making this into a company. And that works well for the people there because they want to keep doing their science and they're happy to see their idea become something else. On the West Coast, where people go because they want to create things, that doesn't work as well. So on the West Coast, investors who want to be able to invest in great companies have to invest in the people that are having the idea, as opposed to buying the idea and creating their own thing. And that both of those start to develop their positive feedback loops that generate their own ecosystems.
Thank you.
What's your experience been now? I've taken the arrows, Joey and Ivana.
Well, I think for me, so pre-YC, we spoke to we spoke to a few, East Cambridge funds, and long story short, I think I echoed what Uri said. They were basically like, either where's your phase 2 asset? And I'm like, haha, very funny. I know how to sequence RNA. I don't have any drug. And then the other was, where are all your degrees, right? And I think that's definitely, we got dinged on both of those. I think, we experienced all but one of our investors are on the West Coast in Silicon Valley. And I think, risk adverse is probably the wrong word, but I think they were just more willing to take a bet on a young founder like me, and for which I'm really grateful. And again, I think that when the time is right, Arpeggio will absolutely be speaking to different types of funds to fund at different growth stages for us, especially when we have our own, preclinical assets. So we'll probably be speaking to different investors at that point. But, I don't know. Yeah. Ivana,
yeah. I guess the investor that we're working with now has both an East Coast and a West Coast office, and you can tell the difference in sort of perspective. And so the East Coast partners are, like they could never envision working with outside founders. They bring various academics and match them with previous CEOs, et cetera, and start companies like that. And whereas we had a chance to meet the West Coast office, and their perspective was not the same, so they were willing to give it a try. And so I think it was just through continuous interactions that we were able to convince them to work with us and continue working with us. So yeah, there is a bit of a difference, and I think the East Coast office now is adapting as well. So I think there are some, stereotypes, but probably shouldn't worry about them as much, right? You can always change them.
The exceptions, I think, matter more than the rules.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you very much for the last question too.
So, were there any other questions?
Hello. Hi, this is Haru, MC. Yeah, thanks for I would like to show huge gratitude to all speakers from YC and alumni. And it was really fruitful to hear such a realistic story. So because we have 1-2 minutes left, so just a quick question from here. I think you have already mentioned, cover the story of your journey. Yeah, but I think you too, especially alumni, Ivana and Joy, should have had multiple career options. But what was the exact moment that you decided to launch your company? When and where? And whether you were having a coffee, lunch over the coffee, or in a laboratory, what was your backstory?
Maybe I can answer that. It's probably easier for me to answer. I was kind of kicked into it, So I was working, as I mentioned, at Pfizer, and really loved my project, and that's where I met my co-founder and my the early employees. What happened is that our site, they decided to move to San Diego, and so there was an actual event, precipitating event, that helped us, with this decision. So, we were either going to move to San Diego or we're going to take the layoff package, right? And so, that's how we decided. We said, we had this, opportunity, right, to really leave and have some backing, right, of the layoff package to put into our next project, right, rather than getting a job, right? So it was an actual just taking the opportunity that presented itself and using that opportunity to start this journey.
Yeah, such a good question. There were lots of moments for me, but two immediately come to mind. One is when I was a PhD student, I discovered or rediscovered with our platform that Nutlin, which is a very fancy drug, popular drug, its target was p53. This has been known for decades, right? But we did a very simple experiment and we fed it through our machine learning algorithm. I mean, we got the right answer. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, can this work on other drugs, right? And I got that hit in my stomach feeling where I was worried at that time because I was in academia about being scooped. I was like, this was so easy. This data collection was so simple and the machine learning was so straightforward. Certainly somebody is going to publish in like 2 months, right? And nobody did. And we wrote a patent really quickly, and we got the paper out. And I at that point, it was like this. At that point, I felt relieved, but I also felt like there was a there. And then I remember where I was when the Forma Therapeutics deal closed for Arpeggio, and that's when I knew that this was going to be a real thing. I'd be doing this for the 5-10 years of my life, right? So I don't know. It's tough. I think it's the pit in your stomach for me is when I realized that this was going to be a real company. Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much for answering to my deep-rooted question. Yeah. And again, we would like to thank to everybody, Uri Lopatin from Y Combinator, and to alumni, Ivana and Joy, for attending to this session. Thank you very much. ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much.
Thank you.